and sponsoring today's webcast entitled, Are You Feeding the Audit Beast? For those of you who are new to ACT, I am Paul Matiola, Director of Income Tax at Verizon Communications. I am also the current president of ACT. ACT, or the Association for Computers and Taxation, is a nonprofit educational organization that has been centered around education relating to tax and technology for corporate tax and technology professionals for the past 32 years. ACT is also considered to be the preeminent association for corporate tax professionals who are interested in advancing operational effectiveness through the broad use of technology. As a national nonprofit education organization, ACT is designed to provide a forum for tax professionals to stay abreast of trends in technology and to learn best practices that will help today's tax departments reach new levels of operational excellence. The educational opportunities we offer our members include bi-monthly webcasts such as this one, bi-monthly electronic newsletters, conferences, and publications such as survey results, and much, much more. Before we begin today's webinar, there are a few ground rules that we'd like to cover. We're going to keep the lines on mute. If you have any questions or concerns during this session, you can use the chat feature offered on GoToWebinar, which will be monitored by a Red Moon representative. At the end of the presentation, we will answer as many questions as possible. Additionally, we ask that you exit out of all other applications that are currently running on your computer to optimize today's viewing of the webcast. Today's slides will be made available after the webinar and can be found by clicking through the link on the ACT website. Please allow a few days for the presentation to be posted, as well as a recording of this webcast. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar, Kelly Lear. Kelly is the Managing Director of Red Moon Solutions, a company founded by the former CIO and Head of Tax Technology Enterprises for Arthur Andersen LLP, as well as the HOTD for the Milwaukee tax practice of Arthur Andersen. Kelly came over to Red Moon from Vertex, where she was Director for Vertex Consulting and Tax Intelligence Solutions Leader. Kelly has extensive experience in providing tax solutions and consulting services for Fortune 500 companies across all major tax types, including income, sales and use, exemption certificates, property tax, payroll, telecommunication, and VAT. These solutions include process reengineering and design, integration, ETL tools, data collection, and tax data warehousing. I'd now like to turn it over to Kelly.
Great, thanks, Paul. This is Kelly Lear, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. As we all know, federal coffers are in dire need of tax revenue. And with federal funding for states all but dried up, the audit beast we've been talking about for the past year or so has been really kind of mutating into a whole new beast. So I thought this graphic was a little bit apropos. The beast may have a suit and tie, but it has a hunger that just can't seem to be quenched more recently. So in some cases, folks are even believing this beast isn't even playing fair. So with cash-hungry Treasury and states, preparing for and responding to tax examination is growing more challenging every day. With the increased transparency and more information required in a lot shorter time frames, and even with global audits, higher instances of cross-border audits and sharing of information, and taxing authorities streamlining their process and expanding resources, it's a whole new world out there. In fact, I just ran across a survey recently given by Ernst & Young, which is their tax risk and controversy survey that some of you may read. And it examines the fact that there is greater uncertainty out there, and it's posing a whole new financial and reputational risk for leaders of global companies. The survey expounded further by sharing that 77% of their respondents in a 551 company survey said that managing tax risk and controversy will become even more important to them in the next 2 years. And this figure increases to 88% for large companies. So you can see why ACT asked us to put together a presentation on this topic. It seems like many of you definitely do care about this whole process out there and want to learn more. So as you already know, I'm sure tax enforcement is on the rise, and as is the sophistication in some of the taxing authorities. In the same breath, however, we're hearing that in some cases that even though there's a step up in activity, some places still do have a direct opposite level of sophistication or still doing things somewhat manually, and also have a lack of skilled or sophisticated examiners or agents because they're scaling up so quickly that skill sets are not a priority perhaps in some areas. In addition, phasing in last year and even heavier this year, more information reporting requirements than ever before. So you're hearing more about FBAR and FATCA and other withholding requirements, B notices, and further documentation. So it should be proved to be a pretty challenging environment out there. And as you can see from this graphic, I was kind of choosing between this guy getting his head stepped on and a woman that had her head in a vice, because that's how I feel when I kind of think about all these things coming together. But I also thought I'd share a little bit of the direct quotes from what some of your peers are saying out there and where they're seeing some of the pains across all of the various, whether it's an IRS audit or a state or sales and use tax audit or a locality. What are some of the big issues out there? So I posed a couple of questions on LinkedIn and some of the social media sites, and I had people responding pretty rapidly on these topics of tax controversy and audit. And so I'm going to share some of those with you on the next couple of slides here. One of them is that Illinois, you can see this top left of the slide, states hiring more auditors. In fact, Illinois hired 50 new auditors by the beginning of December 2012, so right at year end. Further proof that, you know, the states are ramping up. And as far as the sophistication goes, I was at the Chicago Tax Club meeting where New York talked in depth about creating what the taxing authorities are calling a new, sophisticated, transparent audit selection process. And it's almost wholly computer-driven. They're hoping to uncover fraud and underpaying taxpayers more easily. And they're also fully automating online the IDR process. So that's a pretty interesting development. State transfer pricing. Some states are hiring transfer pricing consultants to review state corporate tax return data and to identify taxpayers with thin transfer pricing based on narrow profit margins or continuing losses. And then I thought this one was a really interesting one. This woman actually responded to me offline, had actually posted something on LinkedIn, and she shared this quote on MTC audit, so I'll kind of read you the quote. I think the one thing I'm most concerned about with audits is getting a call from the MTC. Their audits consume vast quantities of time, resource, and paper, only to be delivered results that are significantly wrong. The one-size-fits-all doesn't work for any state, and neither do their sloppy audits. They will do 8 to 12 states at a time, and they do both state income and sales and use tax audits together. Unfortunately, their auditors do not seem to know that the individual state laws will apply what they think the law should be across the board to the states under audit. So some interesting feedback from your peers. And here's some more. A stunningly large preliminary assessment. That was a direct quote. The assessment was almost $1 million. To put this into perspective, such an assessment, if any, should have been approximately $50,000 at most. So multiplying that across the board, you get some pretty large assessments. Another several tax pros said that Tennessee had its sales and use tax challenges. Getting auditors to commit to closing the audit was really challenging, so their escalation procedures don't seem to be working very well there. An auditor sent an annual waivers 3 times in the past 3 years rather than closing out a relatively nominal $30,000 audit. Another was that questionnaires are getting much more lengthy. And here's another direct quote from someone pretty frustrated out there. easily the most extensive listing of questions I've ever seen from an auditor. At one point, I asked the auditor if he was going to apply for a job with us. So I thought this guy shared some interesting insight here. Arizona and Texas are the worst right now for sales and use tax issues. There are an extensive volume of invoices required for auditor sampling and resolving auditor-prepared monthly reconciliation of tax return data versus work paper and GL data. So we had a lot of responses on that on LinkedIn and people chiming in to that effect as well. Another person said, I'm seeing a lot of divergences from IRM procedures and even taxpayer rights in some cases. So again, I think you can get a flavor of the beast from some of those comments from your peers out there. So what are tax pros using today to make it through these cumbersome processes and to respond to mountains of documentation and information requests? Well, some folks are lucky and they've got a fully automated end-to-end process. However, that's not what we see most often out there. Most often we're seeing that there's hard copy documents might be getting scanned and sent via email. They're tracking their requests and IDRs and other detailed follow-ups in Excel spreadsheets, and maybe they're saving off documents as well as their task lists on shared drives. Perhaps companies are using compliance solutions for some or all of this, which is good. Some solutions like Corp Tax are taking it one step further and using their compliance solutions to help on the front end, including contingencies management. So they're able to, save off their tax positions and document and categorize a lot of things ahead of time so that it's easier down the line. So some folks are doing that out there. Depending on what you're using, though, we're still seeing a lot of folks using responses through email. Maybe they're using some file transfer mechanisms. Those can be FTP. They could be using Dropbox and some other systems, YouSendIt and others. And we're seeing that dates and documents and workflow is still pretty challenging for them to have at their fingertips and make sure that they're able to access those readily, and it's very transparent across all the items that they're having to track, whether it's notices or full-blown audits across their entities. So now let's turn around that audit beast concept and think about the positives here. I've kind of perhaps depressed you a little bit, and now let's think about it, how we can be a little bit more proactive. This environment provides really the perfect opportunity for companies to get ahead of it, to be timelier, to be precise, and more transparent than we ever deemed necessary or perhaps possible due to the evolution of technology and our sophistication with these technologies. The good thing is that we can get our arms around this and we can make a significant improvement in the ways that we're managing and responding to notices and audits. There are finally really viable process changes and solutions out there that are cost-effective, easy to implement, and can provide immediate and significant benefit, which is really a big change from the past. We can handle increased volume and scope of audits across all tax types and jurisdictions. And we can even automate various issue and notice tracking and keep track of dates and reminders, as well as to really control that whole end-to-end workflow and maintain accurate documentation after the fact. So within our we always talk about making changes in terms of people, process, and technologies, and especially at ACT we talk about that all the time. So I thought I'd kind of talk a little bit about each of those areas and really on a high-level generic stance in terms of across all tax types and across all types of audit activities, even though we know there are some distinct flavors as you get down into various jurisdictions and tax types. But I think you'll find that some of these strategies will ring true across the board. So we're going to start out here with our people and process part of the technology equation, and we're going to talk about the best practices that are employed out there at each phase in the audit cycle. So let's start with people and process. It's important to identify risk areas in your audit process and then build what we call defense strategies, if you will, to the structure and operations across the enterprise. And we think this is an integral part of the pre-audit process. So these could be areas that you identify that could be account reconciliations, it could be balance sheet items, it could be particular vendor accounts, it could be property tax assessments and payments if you're in every jurisdiction known to man. It could be transfer pricing with state transfer pricing or global transfer pricing. And it could be allocations where you have your troubles. So identifying these risk areas and building defense strategies. Understanding all material transactions that have occurred and will occur in your business activities that could trigger audit activity, tax controversy risk. And it's very important. So if you don't already have a seat at the table when these decisions are being made well ahead of time, you need to figure out either how to get there or how to have proper access to that information, preferably prior to the transaction, but at the very least, detail on that transaction and an analysis of why it was done and what's occurring now. Another big area is negotiating pre-filing rulings, unilateral agreements, advanced pricing agreements, and accelerated competent authority or mutual authority procedure negotiations. That's quite a mouthful. If anyone has more questions on those, you guys can shoot me questions as well. There's a big push to be reaching out to audit authorities to negotiate ahead of full audit kickoff to gain better understanding and to strive for audit penalty protection. And actually, a lot of the jurisdictions at the state level are trying to do this. There's a big push to get these things negotiated quickly, get any kinds of tax payments or penalties in the bank quickly. So you can see what's happening out there. Another one is creating electronic or shared libraries for supporting documentation on key audit risk areas or information requests such as transfer pricing, B notices, 1099s, those are kind of branching out into the information reporting area. There's been a lot of posts on LinkedIn and even in some of the more popular tax bloggers out there regarding information reporting and B notices this year. So identify these areas and get ahead of them in terms of planning. Identify those changes, what you expect your exposure to be, and what you're going to need to get in place to better automate these processes. And that's, really regardless, again, of what technology solution you choose. Audit strategies. So best practices and audit strategies are hard to do in a presentation, as I mentioned, because we're talking across all tax types and across all types of audits and information requests. But I thought these generic best practices kind of fit across all. And if anyone would like to understand or drill down into a particular tax type for that particular audit strategy in terms of best practices, let me know or let ACT know. We'll put together some more materials on that and really drill down on a particular area of pain for you guys. But you can see on the first bullet point, I'm going to move down to bullet point 5 first, and I'm going to mention that I bolded this out. You really can manage and control the audit. And let me go through this slide and tell you a little bit more why we think you can do that. The first bullet is know the players. So who's going to be involved in your audit, and what are the various escalation procedures you can count on when things are not going as you'd hoped? What is the chain of command, particularly in state audits? What's the chain of command? Who can you talk to? How can you lift that up a notch and if things aren't going as you had hoped and that audit isn't staying current. In fact, state revenue agents like New York and Chicago seem to be very open on how that process should work. At least that's what they've actually been speaking at a lot of the conferences I've been attending, like the Chicago Tax Club and others, on how that process should work. And they're actually incenting folks to escalate things quicker than they probably normally would have to keep these audits current and moving and making them more expeditious, if you will. For global companies, ensure that whoever kicks off the audit first, whether it's the domestic or the international examiner, get them involved quickly so that you have a a common approach or a common attack, if you will, to that audit beast if you've got global and domestic going on concurrently. And make sure your audit plan is clearly written, articulated, and worked. And you might have to play around with this a little bit in terms of what works for your company and who you get involved depending on the type of company you are. Some folks have to get their plants involved and their business units very involved as soon as there's any audits that are occurring and planning for those audits. Know your rules of engagement and what you can do to push back. I keep going back to this because when I was asking questions out there in the field of what people are experiencing, there are differences across the board in terms of the state taxing authorities anyways, and what people are experiencing out there, whether they feel like people are trying to make these audits current or if they're delaying them and it's a very cumbersome long-term process. And so there are things you can do to push back and control the audit. Also, if you can integrate process with technology, and I'm going to talk about technology on the in a couple slides from now where you can see what the solutions are out there. They've come a long way so that you can embed your process and your people and process and technology all into one platform. And you can use some best practices and controlled workflows that can be reused and continuously improved. So that if you're getting audited from year to year, you're able to get better as you go from year to year. You can leverage prior year's learning, and you can leverage things like shared work papers and shared positions and things that you've done in the past that have been successful. Or even remembering positions and things that were done in the past if key players leave your organization. Post-audit strategies. So what can you do after the audit? Managing the process in a very precise way using automation tools and electronic support. So if you're responding, paying, protesting, perhaps going to arbitration or court, make sure that you document each step. What the turnaround was, how did things progress, what was said when, and what those outcomes are. And if you're able to save the company money and it results in tax savings as well, make sure that that's documented and lifted up. Document all presentations and negotiations at each step of the way. And have audit-ready files. This is a big area. We have folks that call this audit in a box or audit-ready files. Tagging your documents appropriately, providing easy access, and bundling these your documentation in a way that these audits are ready to move. And you're able to communicate these effectively with the whether it's an IRS agent or a taxing authority. Another thing that folks do after an audit that's very successful is doing what we call, and back in the Anderson day, we always did plus deltas. So we would have a working session with everyone involved in the audit cycle, and we would whiteboard out what went well, or the pluses, we called them, and then what did not work so well and where we could make some improvements, or the deltas. What could we change to make things better? So this way you can incorporate that feedback into your next audit cycle. And I know you're kind of always running at 100 miles an hour and it's hard to have time to do these, but they can be so valuable if you actually take the time to do it. These are little plus deltas that you can do in 2 hours or less, and we recommend that you try to do those in 2 hours or less, or if you break them up into 2-hour segments depending on how many people need to be involved. But it is good to include the others that touch the life cycle, whether it's treasury, finance and accounting, business units, plants, and others. So that, if they feel your pain, they understand what you're trying to accomplish, what the challenges were in the last audit, and what the repercussions were even in some cases. Perhaps they can help you to come together with prospective solutions. And we see huge successes when you do involve other people from other groups. Okay. So things that you guys like to, and all of us like to kind of look at with ACT as well, is the actual technology solutions, and what are the things out there that people are using, and what are some of the best practices out there. So we've talked about the people and process, so let's talk about the technology solutions. And what I've done is kind of put these into two general main categories, or main options. So I have like option 1 and option 2. And just to kind of give you some structure there. Option 1 of what folks are doing for automating through technology solutions are utilizing enterprise systems. They are enterprise or more generic systems that are implemented across all departments within an organization, and then they're typically customized for tax to support things like notice tracking and audit process, and perhaps other tax department processes, if you will. So think of it like SAP or Oracle systems that all tax departments leverage across the organization, but might not fully meet the needs of tax without a little bit of work or a project to get you there. So these are document management and collaboration tools that would be used for notice tracking and audit through appeals. And so these aren't any different. Those are not going to be out of the box in a generic or enterprise solution, so those would need to be created within those types of systems. So on this slide, I put a lot of good examples that we see out there in the field in working with our clients and you all out there. So these are typically systems that have been purchased by IT, the CFO, and other groups and are being leveraged across the organization already. So examples are Microsoft SharePoint, Documentum, LiveLink or OpenText, FileNet, iDatix or other proprietary document management and workflow systems. And then there's a host of other kinds of generic web portals that your company might be employing, and they could be built in-house using .NET platforms and things like that as well. And then the last one is Dropbox and other FTP document sharing tools. So you might not have full workflow in these types of solutions, but maybe that's your enterprise solution for all of your document storage and document tagging and sharing documents with the outside world, such as the IRS agent or taxing authority. Now, by far the most popular one that I see a lot out there is SharePoint. We do, however, see the next two a lot as well, Documentum and LiveLink or OpenText. Documentum is a system that's been picked up by ECM, which is a document storage solution company, very large company. And Microsoft SharePoint, of course. A lot of organizations are deploying SharePoint across their organizations. And SharePoint really comprises of a set of multi-purpose web technologies that are all on the common Microsoft infrastructure. So by default, SharePoint has a Microsoft Office-like interface, and it's, of course, closely integrated with the Office suite, so as you would expect. And the web tools are designed to be usable by non-technical users. At least that's what they market to you. Now, there's debate out there in the community whether this is truly super easy enough for tax pros to just pick up on their own and start to run with some of these tool sets, or does it require more tax technology, expert person, or really some of the folks like the Big Four and the regional firms have whole practices around implementing and customizing these solutions for tax. But the key thing to point out is these systems can do things like, and some better than others, is they can provide intranet portals so that you can communicate across your tax department and also give access to other groups within your company. They can also provide for document and file management, so true document controls. You check documents in, you check documents out. You can keep the revision and history of those documents. You can tag those documents with various what we call metadata about those documents. So what audit are they for? Are they, what type of document are they? What tax year does it relate to? Those kinds of things. They have collaboration mechanisms and tools in there. And they also, some of these systems are better than others in terms of connecting to the outside world. So they can have an extranet, if you will, so that you could have other people from outside your organization accessing these systems as well. Okay. They also can incorporate some business intelligence solutions. Again, some better than others, like SharePoint is much better at integrating some of the business intelligence solutions than some of the other solutions that you see on here. And then across enterprise searches, ability to integrate other applications that you guys use within the tax department, whether it's your compliance solutions or the general ledger or other tools that you might have to access data from and so on. Okay? And then the other flavor of tools out there, if you will, is, or category, I'm calling option 2, which is audit and notice tracking specific tools that are built by and for tax pros. So out of the box, they've been made to support tax processes. Okay, so there's several on this sheet here, and there's others out there, for sake of time purposes. If anyone wants other solution lists and things like that, both for the enterprise solutions as well as for the tax specific, I just picked the ones that are the most common for our type and size of organizations that we see out there. But you have the Red Moon Solutions, Audit Room, Notice Tracker, and Calendar that are all on the eTax portal suite of products. Those are integrated, and it's a cloud computing solution, software as a service, which are many of the other solutions out there. And like many of the other solutions, they provide management tracking across all tax types, as well as being able to integrate with the compliance solutions, as well as tax payment remittance or AP, and other systems such as SharePoint. So some of these solutions can be built on SharePoint, or they can integrate directly with SharePoint because they're already on a Microsoft platform. So there's a lot of functionality here. The Corp Tax Workspace, they have, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, contingencies management, so on the front end, as well as Workspace allowing users to define audit management processes in a clear real-time view of what transpires during the audit, as well as throughout the organization's audit cycle. So they're also on a common platform. The audit management process and content package, and they have notice tracking and statute tracking now as well. and I believe those last two are a little bit newer. And they can manage the specific tasks of the entire audit process systematically. So just like some of the other tools, there's audit notification, steps along the way where the process moves from end user to end user. There's approval processes. There's document gathering and delivery. There's settlements, tax payments, and filings that are all tracked within these tool sets. There's also OneSource Audit Manager. Again, they're allowing you to do a similar thing where you're collecting, tracking, and viewing all government information requests, proposed adjustments, transactions, settlements, and taxpayer adjustments in one central location. Again, the concept here is that these are tax specific. They are allowing you to do this across all tax types. They're a one platform solution that you have access and transparency to all processes and documents. And you can set up the ability to track these, on the front end. So you have audit-ready files, if you will, across all your tax types. OneSource also allows you to scan notes and documents directly into the system. And all the systems are going to allow you to, these tax-specific systems will allow you to track from the very beginning. So setting up your IR, IDRs, information document requests, proposed adjustments or notice of proposed adjustments. Some of you guys call them NOPAs or NPAs out there. Any transactions that are occurring, settlement amounts and RARs or revenue agent reports and adjustments, or TPAs, they call them taxpayer adjustments. So all the metadata, the process to track these are included in these types of systems. In addition to, in some of the systems, you can track end-to-end the whole protest and appeals. So an end-to-end process for protest and appeals. The Deloitte Tax Controversy Manager is a newer solution for me to learn about out there. But I read things starting in October of last year about this Tax Controversy Manager, and which is also a web-based technology that does a lot of the things that I talked about with these other solutions. And it also allows you to manage the data flow prior to and during the tax examinations, as well as to retain and track various sources and types of information globally. So they have a big focus on the global and the ability to track what-if scenarios and do a lot of the global tracking. And they do, and of course Deloitte offers services around their tax controversy manager, and they have a tax controversy practice as well. So there's a lot of various solutions out there for you. I thought it might also be helpful to share quickly some of the pros and cons to the two options, the enterprise solution and the tax-specific solution. And I'll try to get through these fairly quickly here. So the pros for the enterprise system, I think you probably have a good sense of this. You may have a lot more political support in going with this solution than other tax-specific solutions, especially if you have an in-house group maintaining and supporting SharePoint already. So your tax teams may have also already integrated SharePoint and for other purposes throughout your organization, and you can leverage all that learning and good work that they've already done. SharePoint and some others also have the ability to customize triggered workflow and can be a handy tool for building out those triggered workflows where you want to maintain structure and make sure things don't get missed. Okay. Some of the cons to the enterprise system are that some of these systems can have a challenging security framework. They all allow you to have some extranet components, so you can have external access, but some of the systems require you to set up two sites, if you will, one for internal, one for external. And some of them are a little more challenging from a technical perspective, so it just needs more support from IT. These systems will not have tax workflow or tax-specific fields out of the box. So metadata such as legal entity, tax years adjustments, transfer pricing, and other terms and workflows will need to be built in and supported. So it will require some or a lot of your tax department time and tax technical resources in many cases to work through these solutions. Also depending on how much you're actually automating and tracking in them. These systems can require a lot more maintenance and processes around those regular updates because they're enterprise systems. So they require, project requests with IT and those updates to be scheduled and the testing to be a little bit more cumbersome than in other cases. Let's see here. They can also be timely and costly and require a lot more forward planning because of these things, requiring a lot more technical resources to help you and also planning updates. I have one client that is on one of these types of systems, and they have to put in a project request every year just to have the tax years change from the drop-down. So that can be a little bit challenging. Data integration can also be challenging on some of these systems if your team hasn't already worked through this, or if there's not APIs or ways that these systems already have standard out-of-the-box integration capabilities. And some of these are better than others at their actual document search, even though they have huge document management capabilities. Some of the search isn't as multidimensional as some folks have liked out there. And the last thing that's pretty key is that they don't incorporate already the best practices across your tax colleagues and the industries out there. So the vendors that are tax specific that are working on these types of solutions are constantly getting feedback from the field and your peers out there in terms of what are needed, as well as what they already know from having worked in the field. Okay, so sorry I didn't have that slide up there. You can download these slides, by the way. Okay, so the pros and cons of the tax-specific audit and notice tracking management systems. Systems like Workspace and Audit Manager and the Tax Controversy Manager and Audit Room and those kinds of systems are built to incorporate years of learning and the thinking of the tax pros. A lot of those systems have auditor feedback and input into them and the taxing authorities. And some even have industry-specific and regulatory requirements already built in depending upon the industry. So that's pretty handy to have all that up and running. These systems can and should have also tax-specific workflows across all audit types and information requests, and complete notice tracking and full integration with even things like payment remittance systems or the general ledger, or maybe if you're outsourcing the payment to another company, we've seen a lot of these systems integrating with those payment remittance systems as well. So you can have end-to-end full automation, and I'll show you an example of that in a second here. These can be cloud computing solutions, so you need a lot less IT folks' time. And there's even companies that have gone completely paperless across every jurisdiction, and they don't even allow any auditors on site, and they don't get the initial paper from the auditors. They actually log right into the system. So that's pretty sophisticated, but we see varying levels of that automation with clients out there, and the tools exist to allow you to do that. There are also a variety of features that are indicative of the nature of tax and audits, or the nature of the beast, if you will, which will require special capabilities that are already built into these systems. So things like working on audits across multiple periods and for certain entities across multiple periods, and to be able to tag your documents accordingly. Also, the uploading high volumes of documents and still expecting great performance. You should. The ability to roll over and share workflows and work papers and other supporting documents across your examinations and across your tax years. And then also just being able to get up and running quickly without an enormous consulting project to automate one particular notice tracking or one particular type of audit or multiple types of audit. There's ways that you can be up and running in a day or two, or a very short period of time in some of these solutions. Some of these cons, with everything you can think of some of these as the pluses and minuses, but some of the cons are some of these systems are not on SharePoint, which IT groups do not like. And some are on SharePoint, which some like and some don't. So you have to figure out, what is your IT group, going to deal with? What are they going to let you do? There's a lot of change management associated with these types of systems if they're already using other enterprise systems in-house. These systems can be very user-friendly, but it's change. So anytime you're dealing with change, there can be issues there. It may be also harder to get IT and leadership involved to purchase, even if it's a lower cost, because they would like you to leverage the enterprise system in most cases. Still, you may need to work through how you're going to integrate with your compliance solution if it's not already on your compliance platform, or integrating with your financial and accounting systems and so forth, especially if you haven't done this before with an external product. And then there's many SaaS or cloud computing solutions that your company may not let you do. So there's some of our prospects or clients out there that just won't let them get there yet. They want everything in-house. So, and some of these solutions can be an in-house install as well. So key things to think about: how can you more effectively manage one end-to-end process and eliminate paper as much as possible? How can you touch just a piece of paper once or twice at the most if you can, get it down to that? And how can you make sure that you're going to continue to minimize the time to do that one process and really streamline that process? How can you eliminate the most risk and failure points in that process? Okay? And you have to investigate what your company is and is not willing to do depending on that solution set. So I thought you might want to see an example, kind of a mini case study, if you will. So, what I think is a best practice is to kind of take baby steps. Don't try to do all-you-can-eat approach that can be challenging even for the most savvy of tax departments. Here's an example company that I'm working with that is a great example of taking that step-by-step approach or baby steps to more effectively automate this whole process. They really started with fully automating the using like an online calendar with all their compliance dates, extensions, estimated payments, regulatory dates, annual reports, filings, so that's across every tax type, as well as unclaimed property, business licenses, and then all of their notices. So in one place, not just their compliance and filing dates, extensions and payments, but also all of their notice tracking. And those are tax and non-tax notices, anything that tax had to have some responsibility for. So those can include 1099s, invoices, AP, and others. And then they fully automated their property tax notices, assessments, invoices, and audits through a portal, and fully integrated that, within their calendar filing. So from one place, they were able to do everything end to end. And now they're going to work on fully automating their audit rooms for sales and use tax and federal and state income tax. For this company, because they're telecom, their sales and use were even more challenging than their federal and state income tax. So they wanted to hit the regulatory and sales and use tax audit cycle first. And so you kind of have to pick your pain points and then work on automating those, as you go. And then later on, they're going to have their portal integrate with their tax data warehouse and their business intelligence solutions so that they'll have everything in one place and they'll be able to see complete transparency, and then key metrics and dashboarding, all from one kind of portal solution. So let me just kind of walk you through real quick, and then I'm going to leave a few minutes at the end here for some questions. Here's an example notice process. Basically, step one is that the tax administrator uploads a notice, which automatically gets assigned to a tax pro who manages those types of notices. The tax pro then gets an automated email that notice has been entered and assigned to them. They can click on that email. Again, you could always log in directly to the portal, but you can get these notices by email if you so choose. It will log them directly into the portal where they can enter any responses, notes, any attachments, and assign to the approver. An approver gets an email saying there's a notice for his or her approval. They click the notice, review, and approve it, or if they have to, they send it back with comments and further action, and that gets routed through the appropriate workflow. For notices requiring payment or tax remittance, they can approve that amount and send it directly or queue it up for a payment run. So you can actually integrate the tax payment process in this example, or if you're outsourcing that process, a file can be sent as approved to that outsourcing group. Here's an example property tax process. It's step one, property tax obligation is assigned to a tax pro, and an email is sent out to them. The tax pro clicks the email to respond to the obligation. Later on, the state assessment is received and uploaded into the portal. The assessment amount is checked against the assessment or initial liability projection, and action is taken or not depending on that variance. So someone will decide, is that variance pretty great, and they're going to check into it, or are they going to go ahead and approve that as a viable payment to the taxing authority. Property tax bills received from the state, uploaded into the portal and checked against the assessment and the original estimate, and then the approver approves for automating the payment and integrating signature capture. So again, this is an example that shows that you could truly do this paperless, process, management and approval process, as well as recording and initiating the payment. And then tax has all this, information and approval process at their fingertips. Once paid, the check clearance and payment amount is tracked in the portal and tied out. And then there's a complete audit trail and key metrics tracked by the system. So turnaround times, tax savings, and then time to complete each part or the entire process are tracked within the system. And then quickly, here is an audit process so that you can see that an IDR can be entered and assigned into the system. Again, depending on the system you're using, this could be scanned, emailed, or attached by an end user, or entered by the IRS agent directly, if you can work through that with the IRS agent or the taxing authority. An automated email is sent to the person who handles that IDR. They click on the link and respond to the IDR. They can respond with notes and attachments or documents from a shared library, or may have to assign it to someone else for more information. And again, that gets routed through the workflow that's appropriate for that IDR. This could complete the cycle, or the agent might want additional information. And then the staff would need to follow up through an email assignment or receiving through something back from the agent, and the process starts again. In some cases, that process will end up escalating to the next level. So you might be going through a NOPA process or an RAR process. Again, these can be managed by a portal solution, an automated solution, and tracked at each step of the way, as well as the tax saving associated with working through the process. Okay? So I was trying to get a lot of the other screenshots for you from all the systems, and we just didn't have time to get all the authorization from all the companies in there. But I think we can probably follow up with an ebook or something to share some more of those good systems out there that can help you guys. And, a lot of them look similar in terms of their calendar, notice tracking, audit. There's list views and there's calendar views. There's a lot of filtering and being able to select the data, only the data that you want to see, and tracking each audit end to end in terms of the year, the entities, what type of audit it is, and then having all those electronic files at your fingertips. There's also dashboard reports, and I'll kind of put these up here quickly, and multidimensional reporting so that you guys can see how many tasks are out there, what status are they in, how are your resources being allocated, and what's going on out there. So really full transparency at your fingertips. Okay. So now I'd like to check the question and answers to see if we have some questions out there from the crowd. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm you with information here. Let's see if we can check the chat box here. People definitely want the slides, so we have lots of questions about the slides. Those are going to be on the ACT website, and you guys should see those out there. Okay, let me see. There's also one question on audit-ready files. They were asking, what are audit-ready files? And that's really just where the tax pros are being proactive in terms of creating all the areas for tax risk that they think are out there, and what they are normally. People usually review what has happened in prior year audits, and they're preparing files and tagging those files in preparation for the next audit, whether it's, depending on the jurisdiction and what have you across your entities. So these audit-ready files are really an attempt to get ahead of the process and making sure that you've got a very streamlined process to be ready for that auditor. So when they give you the audit and they give you those requests, you have 80% or 90% of the way there to be able to provide them to the auditors directly. Okay, let's see here. The other thing somebody asked is, how long do these systems take to get up and running? The enterprise systems are going to take longer to get up and running than the tax-specific systems, only because they require a little bit more configuration to set them up, whereas Corp Tax and OneSource and the Red Mooney Tax Portal are already set up for for your needs. So there's a lot less. You might have to set up with taxing authorities, what jurisdiction, what kind of business units and entities and those kinds of things. But the other things don't need to be set up, all the tax metadata and so forth. Those are already in place. One other question. We have a couple more questions on here, but I think we're getting to the end, so I'm just going to answer one more question. Does anyone really provide access to the external revenue agents and taxing authorities? Yes, actually. There are companies out there. There's one large conglomerate that I know of for sure that has moved all audits off-site. So their federal and state income tax audits, as well as all their sales and use tax and state and other jurisdiction audits. And they actually provide access to the system in a very secured manner so that they can log IDRs and information requests and things like that. And those are responded to in an automated electronic fashion. So yeah, some people have been able to do that. And some others I know say they struggle with the taxing authorities to even be more automated than they are. So this company has such a large, foothold out there if they're able to do that. I have quite a few other questions. Federal and state groups share the same database. Let me just answer this one because a lot of people will want this question answered. Yes, you can have. Well, some of these systems will allow you to have separate databases, and some want you to have them all in one. However, most of these systems will allow you to set up groups and to, actually divert what people are seeing or hide what people are seeing and not give them access to things that they don't need to see. So if you have state and local groups and you have federal groups and you have your international groups that don't really need to communicate on some of these areas, and they would have their own logins. They wouldn't be able to, and they wouldn't have to see all the other data, tabs, and work that everyone else is working on. They could just work on their own. And then the leadership level could see across the board if they so choose. Okay? All right, Paul, I'm going to hand it off to you. I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit late here, so let me hand it off to you.
Fine, Kelly. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll try to get some more of those answers to some more of those questions. We had a lot of good questions out there.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the slides from today will be available. Also, a replay of today's webcast can be found at the ACT website. That's www.taxact.org, and that should be available in about a week. Also, before we wrap up, I'd like to mention that our next webinar will be held on April 16th. Registration will be opening soon for that webinar. Additionally, we offer our webinars every other month, so please be sure to check out our website and watch for email for more information. Our next conference is coming up, and it will be May 20th through 22nd at the Hilton Clearwater Beach Resort in Clearwater, Florida, and will feature presentations by tax, technology, and tax technology professionals. This will be your only opportunity next year to network with your peers and tax technology industry leaders, so you won't want to miss this event. Registration is open now, and the conference is filling up fast, so please try to register. Also, make sure that you check out our website to find relevant materials to help you advance and achieve operational excellence within your tax department, such as our bi-monthly news, previous webinars, and much, much more. We'd like to thank everyone for attending, as well as Red Moon Solutions for hosting and sponsoring this webcast. If you'd like to join ACT or would like some more information about ACT, please visit our website at www.taxact.org. Thank you again for attending, and this webinar has now ended.